Hi everyone and welcome. I'm over here in my spreadsheet, my tracking spreadsheet for all my worm systems, and I got a little bit of fun poked at me the other day in one of the comments to my videos, because besides keeping track of all the historical information, something else I've been doing a little bit lately is attempting to map out what happens in the future days. And I think in this particular case, it's really helping me to get sort of a reality check to make sure I'm covering all the bases in preparation for being away. So not only do I have the next day or two, including today, where I've not yet created today's video, and tomorrow, but with tomorrow being my last day home before leaving on vacation, I was curious to see how things map out upon my return. So I actually plotted out my first full day back after vacation when I'll have a chance to return to the tending of my worm bins. And then I mapped out X number of days, in this case 5 days, from the time that I return, assuming that I can actually work on my bins and produce videos each of those days. How long it would take to get everything caught up, and also at the same time helping me see how many days will have lapsed from the previous check-in on that system until that particular future check-in. So I really like this. It takes a little bit of extra width because I usually like to see all the way back any one of these rows all the way back to the origination point of a bin. But in this case, you could see a couple of my systems over here, the two oldest ones, do spill out, so I can't really see the start date, but that's not so important really. It's more about what happened in the fairly short past recently to each of the bins in terms of the most recent check-in, or maybe some sort of a notable thing such as the little symbol I'm putting over here to indicate the start of a horizontal migration, which enables me to look up here and say, hey, that started 26 days ago, the feeding was reinforced 17 days ago, and stuff like that. So I keep certain information in these columns visible until such a time that the information in that column is no longer really relevant or important to be tracked anymore, and then I hide that column. But yeah, I guess what I was really interested in seeing was, hey, if I get back at this point 10 days from now, which is the next time I'll have a chance to work on my bins, how many days will have lapsed in any of these systems upon my return, and is that a realistic amount of time to have left the bin without any attention paid to it? So here on the first day back, I kind of looped all of the maintenance of my outdoor systems together, where I've got sort of a new bin launched off with some of the worms that came out of my outdoor worm bag, as well as a cocoon nursery that's running with the material that came out of that outdoor worm bag. And I've even got a system which has some baby worms growing in it from the material that came out of the crash and burn red wiggler systems that I had all die off on me recently. It's just an attempt to try to rekindle that population using some of the original cocoons that were left over in that material and some of the babies that have been emerging from that material. So those are the outdoor bins. I figured on my first day back maybe I would just do sort of a combined video dealing with all the outdoor stuff and then getting back to all my indoor systems and trying to see how long it takes for me to get caught up. And in this particular example, it will have been 13 days, 13 days, 13 days. It actually maps out in such a way that each one of these check-ins will be exactly 13 days after the previous check-in. So I just figured I'd show this really quickly just to give everyone a sense of how I'm tracking both my immediate future in the next day or two, including today, as well as stuff that's further out in the future, so I can feel confident in the fact that everything's being tended to in a realistic amount of time without anything being kind of brushed under the rug or forgotten about. So today, as you can see, the next check-in is going to be for a bin of European night crawlers that got last fed 9 days ago. It's a pretty young system. It's 41 days of age at this point, and it's already received 3 feedings. Today's feeding will be number 4. So I'm heading down there now. I'll grab the camera and we'll regroup down there. So here's the bin we're checking in on. I guess the one notable thing I didn't mention earlier when we were still at the spreadsheet was that this is the bin where we kind of did a fresh start, sort of warding off a bad outcome We were starting to sense that the bin was sort of crashing and burning. So we kind of rebuilt the bedding area, scooped out all the tainted material, as I referred to it in the past, and helped the worms over into the new space. And at that point, we kind of gave it a new start date based on the introduction of that new bedding material. And now it's been, 41 days since that process started. And that's the reason you see the 2 stickers on here indicating the old start date, which is sort of irrelevant at this point, and the most recent start date. All right, let's get this thing up on the bench and see how it looks. I don't know what this stuff is. Every time I've been coming down here lately and I see all this little pile of debris and stains on the cardboard, I wonder what the heck I'm seeing. I've resisted the urge to check in on it and look more closely, but I believe what I've got here is a dead fly. And I got a feeling that this is right beneath maybe a spider web that's been set up right above this. And it looks like maybe that poor fly got caught up in the spider web. And all these little spots, I'm guessing that this might just be what the spider drops out of its web. Or maybe what's happening to the little creatures that got caught in the web. Sort of dropping their load out of panic. And it's all falling right here onto this piece of cardboard. So that's just my best guess as to what all this debris is, because it wasn't there when we checked in last time. I guess I'll clean that off momentarily. Oh, and I still got to put a glove on. So whatever, let's just get these coverings off, and then I'll take a momentary pause just so I can get my glove hand on, and then we could see what's happening inside this bin. Okay. Besides putting a glove on, I also got all that debris off the cardboard so that when we reach for it later, it's ready to go and we're covering back up again. So I just, I don't know, I watched the past couple videos of mine. They seem like they're just so cookie cutter, and this one seemed like it was going to be just another cookie cutter rendition of what I've been doing past couple days, which is just checking in on my night crawlers, giving them some food. And this is a bin that you could almost not even tell apart from the ones that I fed yesterday and the day before, except maybe for these stains. Because one thing we did do when we evacuated, well, we never evacuated, that's the thing. We extracted the material that we thought had just sort of collapsed under its own weight from being too wet and getting all clumped together, and we brought it outside, but we did first try to remove as many worms as we could from it and save them and relocate them back into this system, but the part of it that had been rebuilt with fresh bedding and materials for them to be able to take shelter in, get away from the nasty tainted material. So the one comment I believe I made last time we checked in on this bin is that, since it was sort of a recovery system, and since there had been sort of a tragedy averted, I questioned if this bin needed a little extra coddling or special attention to help it get back on its feet. And somehow I believe that last week our observations sort of answered our question about whether this system needs to be watched more carefully and taken special care of, or can it just be treated like any other worm bin. I think we decided last week now that since things looked really good in here, looked perfectly normal and healthy, there was certainly no need to continue treating it as a bin requiring special attention. It's I guess its recovery from having had its previous past life is complete, and it seems to be humming along pretty good. So I guess today we'll confirm and verify that we can still continue to feel that way about this bin. It's so weird to be digging this deep down through such a thick pile of bedding. In the past I had just been such a I don't know, I've been sort of stingy with the bedding recently, and it feels good to be back to the point where I'm giving the worms a whole bunch of space to roam around in. I think I may have even described it as maybe even way more space than a number of worms this small requires. Whatever. Hopefully that'll inspire them to, try to fill all that space with baby worms. So one thing that was very reminiscent of this, which is an avocado right in the middle, I believe that was exactly what yesterday's bin looked like too. There again, more cookie cutter for you. I think there too we sort of observed a whole bunch of little white specks like we're seeing here too, and sort of assumed that what we're seeing there was mites to a large degree, and I would say that's probably the same story here too. But we're not going to do time lapse like we did yesterday to try to see that. We're just going to trust that, yeah, that's probably what we're seeing here, and it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. But it probably is a telltale that says, hey, you know, maybe there's just too much food in here. Maybe hand in hand with that is perhaps a little bit excessive moisture. Both variables that would result in sort of a outbreak of mites. I could certainly see this lower area being considered as perhaps a little bit damp. You can see right away it certainly is pretty damp down there. I guess the portion of it I'm trying to figure out though is whether it's a glut of food. Is there just like excessive leftovers in here? That's also contributing to a lot of mite action. Watch it turn out that I'm wrong. Watch it turn out that all these little white specks are just my eggshells that I use as grit. I don't know, like I said, I'm not going to slow the video. I'm not going to slow the camera down. I'm not going to shoot time lapse of what's going on here to, you know, either reveal presence of mites or not. If they're there, treat it as, you know, maybe treat it as just a sign that says, hey, maybe things are too wet, or there's already plenty of food in there, don't feed this time. In this case, I believe it could have just something to do with perhaps what might be considered by some as a little bit excessive moisture. Perhaps the foods that we fed last time just emitted a lot of dampness out of themselves. Kind of creating a haven for mites. There again, maybe I'll stop talking about mites, because maybe these aren't even mites. Some people will go back into YouTube and like play the video back quickly to see if they can sense any movement visually among these little white specks. I'll probably do the same too to get a reality check on it. But whatever, we'll just trust that there's going to be no problem as a result of them, and we're just going to let them be. And maybe by reducing dampness at some point in the future, we'll be able to reduce their numbers a little bit. I mean, to that end, maybe I could sort of try to cherry pick foods that are not going to kick out so much moisture when I go upstairs to select a food assortment for them. So, I mean, before we cover all this up, I was just figuring out to take one last look, see if I could identify anything. This thing somehow seems to me like it might have been like the stem end of some sort of little bunch of something that got, you know, cut up. But if it is, then it's pretty far gone. This is obviously just the part of a corn cob. I've been chopping them into little discs like this, so to see that after a week or so is perfectly normal. Corn cob takes forever for whatever reason, but everything else here seems like just bedding materials that got soaked with the juices of the food that this bin was last fed with, and it just makes all that stuff really almost more like food anymore than bedding. I would almost consider it as more of a food item anymore. Soaked bedding. Bedding soaked with the juices of all kinds of fruits and veggies, I would definitely consider to be more of a food item than bedding. So, I think everything looks good here. Why don't we just proceed with getting today's feeding in here. Let's see here. What do we got? A nice amount of shredded paper over here. Sometimes I look at what I just did and I think to myself, oh geez, did I go overboard? Is that too much? Hopefully it's just the right amount, right? So we're going to stick to the whole idea of building up this environment for these worms by giving them tons of nice space and nice comfortable bedding for them to roam around and explore, and is just what the doctor ordered for them. And if they are in need of any coddling, well, we'll just treat that as their special diet. Lots of carbon, lots of bedding, and hopefully what it'll result in is a nice, happy, healthy population in here. Except they just don't like it when you're setting them up with the new setup. They sometimes like to crawl. I've been observing that in a few of my bins. I wonder if that's always been happening and I just miss it while I'm working on the bin. That would not be surprising at all. So that's a pretty nice layer of fresh bedding. Not so fresh, right? We just recycled some of the stuff that's already been sitting here in the bin for a couple weeks now. And then we'll just replenish that top layer with some nice fresh leaves out of our leaf supply bag. But, you know, now that we've sort of laid in the foundational layer of bedding for the feeding, as well as putting in some of the old food items we found from previous feedings, we do need to shoot upstairs now and get something for them, and I think I know what to get and how much. So, break time. I'll be right back when we come to feed this feeding area. So I gotta admit, I've never really taken a lot of care to selectively put together any particular feeding for any of my worm bins, really. Just more recently, I've been sort of tailoring feedings for old bins to include fewer items that might take a long time to break up, such as the, you know, stems of leaves and whatnot. You know, but this being pretty much my newest bin, it's kind of anything goes. I could put all kinds of slow composting items in here. Not that any of the stuff you see in here is really slow composting. I think it's a pretty good assortment, but it's mainly stuff that, like I mentioned earlier, is stuff that I think is not going to emit a lot of moisture, in the hopes that maybe we can start to see the dampness in this area settle down a little bit. It looks nice, cozy for the worms, but maybe just a little bit too damp, and maybe that's the reason we're seeing little white specks all over the place. And, you know, I just can't seem to take my eye off this little bundle of little white specks. You know, maybe I've just got to sort of break down and switch over to time-lapse anyway, because I'm curious just to see what's going on there, even if it's for a second or two. I don't know why, but sometimes I just can't seem to resist running the time-lapse camera. It's so easy just to hit a couple buttons, and before you know it, you got the magic of time-lapse slowing down the scene so you can see what's going on. But time to get back to work here. It's usually, I don't know, these cardboard tubes, I've been sort of keeping them around lately to build new bins with, but after a while they start to stack up and you start to wonder if, hey, why haven't I just been using them for regular composting? So I think it is time to start paying a little bit more attention to make sure I don't really start to end up with like an overflow of any one particular item as far as supplies go. So I think it's time to get back into using some of these tubes as additional bedding. It's a little bit tougher material, tougher cardboard, so it sticks around for a little while, but it'll go eventually, and this bin's got plenty of life, you know, left in it before it starts to mature to that point where we want to think about harvesting it or doing anything like that with the material in here. So it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of being able to do a lot more stuff. So I guess one of the shoot yourself in the foot sort of ingredients that's going in here is more avocado. If we are, you know, suspecting that avocado is the reason there's mites piling up, not the moisture, then maybe putting more of that stuff in here is not the best idea, but we're going to risk it. So you can see nothing here, I think, is going to, you know, eject a whole bunch of moisture as it thaws. All this stuff is kind of more dry, I believe, in terms of its content. Here's some more, just spread it out, more of these corn cob bits. Here you can better see what they look like. Here too, a banana peel. It's kind of slimy and juicy, but not a great deal of water content to it. I don't think any of these things are going to overly dampen the feeding area, especially with all this dry, all that dry paper, all dry cardboard, all that dry stuff going in there. I think it's going to pretty much maintain its moisture level at a good constant state. And you know what? I've even got this piece of paper here I could use as, oh, one thing I always seem to forget, and it always comes to mind when I'm covering stuff up and using sort of almost like a large piece of covering. It's almost like right when, you know, tucking yourself into bed and then you realize, oh, I gotta brush my teeth, or oh, I forgot to close the window. You know, some sort of little last minute thing. Luckily I'm remembering and not forgetting, because so many times I forget to put stuff in that I wanted to. All right, so here's where we get to start covering up. I don't think we checked the outsides of this bin, so maybe before we get finished here, we take a quick peek on the outskirts of the bin. I can't remember now. Did we look out here? Again, kind of along the lines of checking moisture and consistency. Just wanted to see if things are very dry in this section of the bin that's furthest away from where the feedings occur. Over here, for some reason, there seems to be a good amount of dampness over there. It seems a little bit drier. And I guess with the extra dampness, you do find more of a turnout, a better likelihood of there being worms in the material. Looks pretty good to me. And I guess just from the consistency point of view, hopefully we'll see more of the same on the other side, and I'm sure we will. So far I've seen nothing to indicate to me that there's anything going awry here. Kind of a similar dampness situation going on, but still a good number of worms attracted to being there. So nothing that requires any sort of intervention or reaction. Just sort of a confirmation that everything looks good in the hopes that it would be, and now that we've confirmed that everything looks good. So, you know, 13 days I guess was the estimated amount of time that's going to elapse between now and the next time we're checking in on this bin. Almost 2 weeks. If for whatever reason that schedule slips, it might be 2 weeks or longer before the next time we check in here. But I guess the nice thing about being real generous with the bedding, that even if the food supply that you gave them does suddenly vanish, their appetite really grows, and they do away with all their food a little earlier than expected. They've always got the bedding to turn to as another source of food. In fact, a lot of times you have to wonder if they favor that over the foods that they're getting. So I just peered over to the other side of the table and I realized I almost forgot something, but I believe it's still early enough that we could recover and not treat this as a completely covered up and put away system yet. It's one that we could still include one extra step in, an overlooked step before we close up shop here. It's the addition of the coffee, which is for some stupid reason something I always seem to forget. I don't know, maybe it just blends in really good with this plastic tray that it's sitting in or something. But it's not going to take up a lot of space, especially if I spread it out the way I just did, and we can almost even make the filter vanish as if it was never here either. Because we've already got this one filter that rests up on the top of the surface. It's the one that we sort of treat as our feeding zone indicator. I think by putting the other one down low, right next to where the foods are, the coffee in this case, the filter should get a little bit more broken down than the one that just sits out here on the surface. The one that sits out here on the surface gets a little bit dry, perhaps a little bit drier than, you know, what would be required for the worms to be able to take good advantage of it and make it into a food item. So it's pretty well protected from decomposition. It seems to be lasting a good long time. All right, once again, we've got a little guy that wants out, but trust me, little guy, we're done here. Don't worry about it. Let you relax and let you get back to doing what you do. So that's the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember, leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. All right, that's it. It's too late for the leaves. I'm not going back now to add leaves, so tough luck. I think we'll be fine.